Dear Mr. Soros, dear Aurel, dear Gabriela, dear Katerina, ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed a great pleasure for me to be here at this 20th. It's a great pleasure for me to be here at this 20th International Steering Committee meeting on behalf of Commissioner Andor. He has asked me to apologize that he cannot be with us today. As a Hungarian, he is very much aware, and more aware than many, of the importance of our subject matter, and he sends his very best wishes for our success. The decade of Roma inclusion is a major commitment for all of us here. Since its creation in 2005, it has been a model of commitment to the understanding and to the improvement of the situation of the Roma across Europe. It has played an important role in raising awareness of the challenges facing Roma communities and has provided a useful platform for discussion. It has also informed and inspired much of the Commission's work on Roma issues, including the recent communication on Roma inclusion. And it has been a wonderful example of how, by coming together from across different sectors, whether governmental, intergovernmental, or non-governmental, and including, crucially, Roma civil society, we can bring about real change. We have not worked together like this before, and I hope the decade and the cooperative structures that underpin it will be a sign that we can overcome the challenge that the social and economic integration of the Roma people represents. Ladies and gentlemen, the political commitment shown by European governments through the decade of Roma inclusion is one that is strongly supported by the EU. We believe, as Commissioner Andor has recently stressed, that Roma integration is essential both from an economic and a moral standpoint. We cannot build a truly inclusive Europe if we continue to ignore the needs of disadvantaged groups in society. We cannot achieve high levels of employment and economic growth if we exclude a large part of the potential labor market. And remember the demographics of the Roma population. They are much more favorable than those of society generally. Ensuring that Roma young people are well educated and trained so that they will become productive members of society will be essential to us as our societies grow older and the proportion of pensioners rises inexorably. And it will rise. More importantly, though, let us remember that without high levels of employment and economic growth, we will not regain that competitive position in the world which alone will enable us to achieve our objectives of peace and prosperity for everyone in Europe. Integrating the Roma is essential for everybody's future, whether they recognize it or not. But even above these general considerations, the fact is that the situation of Roma in Europe is not compatible with the social values on which the European Union is built. This is something that the Commission takes very seriously. Our social values are fundamental to what we are. The requirement to share them is built into the commitments that all EU states have taken to each other through the European Social Charter, and we expect all states who want to join the EU sign up to them as well. So the situation of the Roma today is a wound in our sides. It's something we must heal, and we must heal it fast. The Commission's communication of last April on the EU framework of national Roma integration strategies has one overall message: that determined action is necessary to improve the Roma situation. The framework has been endorsed by the Employment and Social Affairs Councils, which has in turn called on the Member States to design targeted Roma strategies directed at 4 areas. In particular, first, education, to ensure that all Roma children complete primary school. And let us be clear with each other that this is an absolute minimum. 15 is the minimum age for the end of compulsory education in the EU, so asking member states to ensure that Roma children reach at least the end of primary education is asking them to do something less than they themselves have already agreed to do. Second, employment, to improve labor market participation rates and reduce the employment gap between Roma and other citizens. Third, health, to reduce the health gap, for example, by cutting child mortality among Roma and by bringing their life expectancy to something closer to that of majority. Finally, housing, to improve access to housing and public utilities such as water and electricity. As you can see, this echoes the decade's own priority areas. But although setting national Roma integration strategies is a very important step, it is only the first step on the long journey to create a full inclusive Europe. Europe 2020, the EU's new strategy for the coming decade, represents our wider framework for action. It aims for smart, sustainable and inclusive growth, and I stress the word inclusive, to build our economic and social model in a balanced way for all Europeans. This is the foundation on which we must build our actions for Roma inclusion, because it brings together all the different areas which impact upon the socioeconomic situation of Roma. We must take a holistic approach if we are successfully to tackle the complex and interlinked barriers that limit Roma integration. Barriers like poor education, poor qualifications, poor health, poor housing, poor employment records, low incomes, discrimination and racism. Europe 2020 will help us do that. Furthermore, Europe 2020 contains a major innovation. For the first time, EU leaders have agreed on the EU poverty reduction target to lift at least 20 million people out of poverty by 2020. We will need a concerted effort on the part of the EU, the member states and stakeholders across Europe if we are to achieve this. And it will be difficult, if not impossible, to achieve this without making serious progress on the effective social and economic integration of Roma people. That is why last year the Commission launched the European Platform Against Poverty and Social Exclusion. This platform proposes actions across the entire policy spectrum, going beyond traditional social inclusion policies. There are many things we have to do. For example, supporting the active inclusion of those furthest from the labor market, preventing the transmission of poverty through generations and tackling child poverty, making social protection and services more effective and responsive to new and social needs, tackling financial exclusion or energy poverty. And in all this, the platform specifically highlights the need to step up efforts to integrate minority groups like the Roma. Like the decade of Roma inclusion, the platform promotes a partnership approach. It is built on the idea that we need constructive dialogue across all levels and that ownership of actions must belong to those mostly concerned. In our case today, that means the Roma communities themselves. What about resources, ladies and gentlemen? The EU structural funds can provide a major contribution to support Roma integration actions. Cohesion policy as a whole provides considerable support to regions in need of development. For the programming period 2007-2013, some 350 billion euros have been allocated across the 27 member states. This is a significant commitment of resources, and we need to make sure that they are fully and effectively used. The Commission would like to see more funds spent on initiatives that deliver real results for the Roma community. So far, a lot has been planned. There have been some successful projects, but not much has changed on the ground. We can do better than this. We must do better than this. The Commission is currently preparing its proposal for the multi-annual financial framework that will cover the period after 2013. If we are to persuade the Member States to make available enough funds to respond to the difficult challenges we face, then we must be able to argue with evidence to back us up that funds will be effectively used and that they can achieve objectives beyond what can be done by national action alone. I do not think that so far our experience with Roma inclusion projects will enable us to do that. The proposed financial framework will be followed by specific proposals on the European Social Fund and the European Regional Development Fund. In particular, our proposals will look at how we can increase the effectiveness of the ESF in achieving the EU poverty reduction target, how best to ensure that enough resources go to promoting social inclusion and reinforcing support to disadvantaged groups, and how we can use the different EU funds more effectively together. Effectiveness and usefulness and full alignment with the Europe 20 objectives will be key elements. Similar considerations apply to those European countries working towards membership of the EU. We have been collaborating with them through the instrument of pre-accession assistance, and there have been good projects in a number of countries. I will not embarrass them today by naming any. What is important to remember is that IPA acts as a preparation for the structural funds, so if it has worked successfully for Roma integration, then the ESF and the ERDF can build on those results. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a long road ahead of us before we attain the full economic and social integration of Roma communities across Europe. Indeed, the economic crisis from which we are slowly emerging makes it not only more difficult to find the resources necessary, but more important than ever to combat poverty and social exclusion faced by millions of Europeans from all backgrounds and all regions. Initiatives like the Decade of Roma Inclusion give us hope for the future. I am certain that with this level of commitment and dedication, our investment will be rewarded. I believe that our discussions today will enable us to form a clear understanding, a shared understanding of the way forward. And I look very much forward to listening to you, to your views and comments, suggestions about the future. Thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you.